This episode is brought to you by my Fertility Management Masterclass. Master fertility awareness and improve your menstrual cycle health at the same time. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/workwithme for details. That's fertilityfriday.com/workwithme. This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 120. Welcome to the 120th episode of the Fertility Friday podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Lisa from fertilityfriday.com, and this is your source for information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility. Now, as you know already, I started this podcast because I believe that every woman has the right to know exactly how her body and her fertility works. And for those of you who are wanting to go deeper into the realm of fertility awareness charting and body literacy, I do have a number of programs that allow you to do just that. And I'm really excited to announce a brand new way to work with me. I'm now offering a one-time in-depth strategy session for those of you who are fairly confident in your charting, but still looking to gain a deeper understanding of your cycles. So for those of you who are wanting to go that extra step and get that customized interpretation of what your cycles are reflecting back to you about your overall health and fertility. And by the end of our 60-minute session together, you'll not only gain clarity and insight about your cycles and how they relate to your health history, but you're also going to leave with a plan, concrete next steps to take to improve your cycles naturally. So make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com/workwithme to book your strategy session today. In today's show, we'll be talking about fertility yoga and the role that it can play in fertility, conception, and pregnancy, as well as the role that taking time to grieve and heal from pregnancy losses, like miscarriage, failed infertility treatments, and other pregnancy losses, can play in helping women to conceive. And today I'm very excited to welcome my guest, Zahra Haji, to the show. Zahra is a healer, a coach, and a yoga teacher who specializes in women's reproductive health and fertility. Zahra has helped hundreds of women to restore their fertility even after 40, and Zahra is also the creator of the Moon Goddess Fertility Yoga program, and it's practiced by women all across the world. And in today's show, we're going to be talking about fertility yoga and the role that it can play in fertility, conception, and pregnancy, and as well as the important role that taking the time to grieve and heal from pregnancy losses, so things like miscarriage, failed infertility treatments, the role that that can play in helping women to conceive, especially women who've received a diagnosis of unexplained infertility, which we've talked about on the show a few different times. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Zahra.
Thank you so much for having me, Lisa. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Well, thanks so much for coming on the show. And I was saying to you in our pre-chat that it's always exciting for me to talk to someone who's local because I don't often have the opportunity to do that. And actually, just a random funny story, but I recently did an interview with Nora Pope. By the time this airs, it won't seem so recent. But she actually came to my house and we did the interview in person. And it was the first interview that I've done in person. Yeah. And it was her suggestion because she just, we live in this world where everything's so digital. She's like, it's so nice to see a real person. So we'll have to meet up in person so that we can actually connect that way. But yeah, so
I would love that.
Yeah, it'd be so much fun. And so I did give you a little bit of an intro, but I'd love for you to share a little bit about your background, how you got into fertility yoga, and basically what inspired you to take this direction in your career.
So when I finished my yoga teacher training, I actually went back for further women's studies. And what I uncovered really shocked me because it was information that I had never heard of. And when I asked around to colleagues and other women, they too had never come across this information. And basically, this is lost wisdom that I feel so strongly about bringing back into our culture. That women's bodies, they cycle with the phases of the moon. Our cycles are reflected in nature. And that there is this really beautiful sacredness that we've really lost touch with. And the way I started off teaching was really around menstruation. And for me, that was a huge something to reclaim for women, was the intimacy that a woman felt with her own menstrual cycle and understanding the gifts that came with it. Later, like when I started teaching Moon Goddess, I found that more and more women who were trying to get pregnant were coming to my classes. And then I would get, emails weeks or sometimes months later, basically letting me know that they were pregnant. And that's when I realized that when a woman sort of recognizes her own feminine power, the sacredness of her body, the connection, so that it's not just about getting pregnant. Like ovulation is not the only focus, and menstruation isn't just a symbol of failure, but a realization that the entire cycle is, is sacred. It has its gifts to give us. And when we work with each phase of our cycle and what I call the goddess energy or the archetypal energy that comes with each phase of our cycle, we take that pressure off of ourselves of, trying to get something done or, succeeding, like when you're trying to conceive, there's that pressure of timing intercourse and making it happen, into really sort of taking a step back, relaxing, and connecting in a more deeper way to your womb, to yourself as a woman, to your heart. And in that place of sort of reclaiming what it is to be a woman, what is your goddess energy? How can you connect with the different phases of your cycle? So of course I do it through meditation and yoga. And once you sort of relax out of the doing and trying harder, there's this allowing and softening and receiving. And I think that's the biggest gift, because conception doesn't happen from a place of force or forcefulness. It happens from a place of receiving and allowing. And that's really at the essence of what I try to help women come into, realization of, that there is this allowing that needs to happen through the vessel of your body. And to me, that's a sacred relationship with the divine and with the creation energy.
Well, I want to stay here for a little while. There's so much I want to deepen into with respect to this. And I guess one place to start us off, I think, would you take us through the cycle and how you describe it to your clients?
Sure. The menstrual cycle, as some of you may know, has 4 phases. So you have the menstrual phase when you're actually bleeding, and day 1 starts when you bleed. Then once menstruation is over, you move into the pre-ovulation phase, and then to ovulation, pre-menstruation, and then the cycle starts again. So in terms of working with your goddess energy, again, it's along with the cycle, and we can bring in the metaphor of the moon. So in your menstrual phase, which is the time of bleeding, oftentimes low energy, a sense of retreat, a sense of ideally pause and taking time out to move into a deep inward place. So we can think of like if you live in a place where there's snow in winter and it takes you inside, it takes you indoors. It's not a time of like lots of action or outward activity. Rather, you want to curl up in front of a fire or under a warm blanket. And that's the energy of menstruation. And the archetype that I relate it to is the wise woman or the crone. And it's a really beautiful time for reflection, for self-connection, for deep self-care, and taking time out for yourself. And then when estrogen surges in the body, you move into the pre-ovulatory time, when spring is starting to bud, when you kind of feel like the energy is returning into like the earth and your energy is kind of returning. It's the same sort of idea. And so archetypally, this phase is called the maiden energy, or I like to call her the go-getter. So it's a time where you feel kind of that burgeoning energy. There's an excitement, there's an enthusiasm, there's a sense of like taking on the world, getting lots of things done, checking off your to-do list. There's lots of momentum and excitement. Then that energy sort of peaks at ovulation. So, of course, this is when you're the most fertile. You can think of summertime. And when everything's in full blossom, full bloom, there's a sense of like fullness. So just like the full moon, we're in a place of abundance, ideally. So the archetype is the mother, or I like to call her the nurturer. And it's a beautiful time to connect with others, to nurture your relationships, to bond with your partner and your family, because you're most connected to your heart. And of course, making it the ideal time for conception, because I believe that, most of us want to create a baby through that place of love between us and our partners. Then we cycle into the premenstrual phase. So now estrogen dips lower than progesterone, or progesterone starts climbing higher, and there's a natural turning inward. So just like in fall, the leaves start to come off the trees, and there's this preparation of, getting ready for winter, getting ready for the hibernation. We can think of it as the harvest time, the time of kind of taking stock, what's happened over the year, what's happened over the month, where are we in relationship to our goals. The archetype is of the enchantress. For women who experience PMS, you might think of it as it's like a huntress energy or a wild woman energy. And so there is a sense of magic and a sense of mystery, a sense of profound power that often we don't know how to work with. We don't know how to wield this energy. So it can express itself as irritation and frustration and anger and irritability. But it can actually, when you know how to work with this energy and you know how to harness the energy of the enchantress, there can be a beautiful expression from a sexual place. There's a magical sense to it. You're very creative at that time, really nice time to write, to journal, to channel strong energy, maybe through a physical practice like yoga or running, but really to sort of move that energy through us. A lot of people like to clean during that time. There's this urge to purge, because you're literally making space to go into a deeper inward place. So that is how I look at the cycle, from a perspective of your goddess energy, your feminine energy, and the emotional aspects of connecting to your menstrual cycle, so that it's, again, not just about conception during ovulation and, failure during menstruation when you're trying to conceive, but how do you work with and get to know these four aspects of yourself and integrate it into your everyday or, every week experience of your month. And it can be a deeply profound and deeply healing experience for a woman who's trying to get pregnant. And then, of course, there's a connection with the moon, which I kind of skipped over, but quickly it's, during menstruation, it's the new moon time. During pre-ovulation, it's the crescent moon time, that's sort of the new beginning, that you're starting to see that new moon coming into vision. Then the fullness of the full moon during ovulation, and then the waning of the moon during pre-menstruation.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for taking us through that. It's such a powerful way of looking at the menstrual cycle. And there's been a couple different interviews that I've done where we've gone through the cycle cyclically from either that perspective. In my interview with Janny White, we went through the cycle from kind of like the TCM perspective.
Yeah.
And in my interview with Claire Blake, which I'll link those as well, similar perspective to what you just described, to really understand kind of like the different energy cycles that you go through. And so there's two very separate and related things that I want to kind of talk about within this, within our conversation. And one of them is that I really want to talk about the whole concept of feminine and masculine energy in a broader sense, and how, just the sense that in our society, in our culture, it's dominated by masculine energy, the doing, the go-getter, the to-do list, the checking things off, the control, and all of that, the productivity. Yeah. But how that is at direct odds with the feminine energy, how there's nothing wrong with masculine energy, but they need to be balanced, and how having kind of this overdriven masculine energy situation can be contrary to conception, fertility.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Lisa. And it's really at the center of the work that I do. Most times, when you look at who is a woman that struggles, let's say the most common archetype or personality that you'll see is the A-type personality. And we're kind of bred in our culture to really prize and value productivity and achievement. So it's not our fault. It's really being a product of this culture of, if you're not producing, if you're not contributing to GDP. You don't even count. And so in this idea, this notion that you need to try harder, do more, it really drives women to a place of depletion and the struggle of maybe if I, go to one more doctor or get one more test or try one more, last ditch IVF, it really has disembodied you by that point. So this is when you really need to spend, 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes a day quietly connecting, coming back into yourself, really taking the focus out of trying to solve the problem and come back to your female body, to your feminine soul, because after all, that's where conception happens. It doesn't happen on the internet. It doesn't happen because you figured out that you have endometriosis and now you're going to get a laparoscopy. Those might be parts of your journey, but pregnancy happens inside your body. And so if you are not able to connect with your body, that to me is the place to start, to begin, to have a relationship with your own womb. If you don't even have a sense of what that means, if that sounds like a foreign concept to you, I really encourage every woman to consider, what is your relationship with your womb? And if it's one of frustration or disappointment, deep sadness, betrayal, a lot of times I hear betrayal and failure, we need to repair that relationship. The feminine cycle gives you an opportunity every single month to go through a healing cycle. You have the burgeoning energy of pre-ovulation and ovulation. And then you have the restorative time when progesterone increases in the body. It forces you to slow down. If you don't listen to that and you fight against it, that's when you have anxiety. That's when you have depleted adrenal glands. That's when you have burnout. That's when you have really, really bad PMS. That's when you have really, really painful menstruation. Of course, it's not completely black and white. A lot of times, even professionals who are, like you, who work in justice have painful periods. There can be lots of underlying issues with diet and lifestyle. But from an energy perspective, from how you live your life perspective, if you're not giving yourself the time for restoration, because the cycle, it demands time for renewal and restoration. And if you refuse to give yourself that downtime because you want to push ahead, because you have deadlines, and of course, that's how life works for a lot of people, but it will show up in how your body works with you or how it works against you. And I don't actually think of it as working against you. It's really a call for attention because your body is constantly giving you messages. If you have absent periods, that's a really important message. If you have, really hormonal PMS that feels debilitating, that's a message from your body. If you have painful periods or cysts or clotting or whatever it is, those are messages from your body. So we need to learn how to have that body literacy, that communication, that dialogue with our body. And so the feminine is always speaking to you through your body. And the masculine approach to fixing yourself is probably not going to help you when it comes to fertility. So what we need is to start to embrace, relax, soften, receive, allow, connect, go inward. And those can be, it can feel foreign, it can feel uncomfortable, like you don't know how to do it. And that's why, I created the program that I created in Moon Goddess, because it gives you a direct path in how to achieve this connection with the feminine, how to come home to your feminine soul, how to realize that your female body is sacred, and how to leverage that connection into, that bridge into creating life through your body and through the divine feminine and the divine masculine, because of course you need both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And what I think is interesting is that the more that I work with women, I mean, ultimately, we know what we need. And it can be, it doesn't always, I mean, until we ignore it long enough and then it's like a bash over the head, we get these senses. So for instance, if I'm working with a client, you get these hunches. They'll say things like, well, I know like my work is probably the reason why this is happening. It's so stressful. I just need to have some downtime, but I just never have time for that. So it's kind of like these whispers where we have this inner knowing of what we need, but it's hard to align that with our lives because of that kind of dominant masculine energy that we're living in, which is productivity, doing, fixing, finding a solution, figuring out the specific hormone that is out of balance and calculating the level. And that is important. It's an important aspect. And it's important to have an understanding. It's also important to know that there has to be this balance between the masculine and feminine energy. Finding out the hormone level tells you something, but it doesn't, that in of itself may not be the whole solution. So that's like a huge part of it. And then that brings me kind of in a different way, because I really like the way that you broke that down, and you touched on the other important point that I wanted to talk about. So the one was really, breaking down the concept of masculine and feminine energy. But then the other point is that because we're living in this masculine energy, and I guess an example for that, if that concept seems kind of vague, like what the heck is she talking about, masculine energy, feminine energy? But so I've kind of defined the masculine energy, which is that that just seeking, the constant doing whatever, to-do lists and super productive idea. But then the feminine energy is more of that intangible, right? Like more of that, the magic, the wonder, when you go outside and you're in nature and you see just the combination of plants and animals and, the weather and how it's all connected. And we can talk about it in science terms, but it's when you walk into a forest or something. I'm from Alberta, and I just having a conversation with some friends who still live in Alberta. And so, for my American listeners, one of the amazing things about Alberta are the mountains, and I miss them all the time. And when I lived there, we would always drive out to the mountains or whatever. When you walk into into that nature, like when you climb a mountain or something, or you walk into a forest, you feel this energy. You feel, and you can't, it's just not scientific. So there's that whole magic mystery part of this thing. And when you're living in a masculine world, that is minimized. So then I think one of the results of that is that as women, we're so disconnected from our bodies. So then when someone tunes into this podcast and you're talking about connecting to your womb and womb energy, a lot of women are like, what the heck is this? That makes me super uncomfortable. And I don't even the concept of it. Like, you want me to put my hands over my uterus and connect with my womb? That sounds crazy and that makes me uncomfortable. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about some of the work that you do with clients, because in the work that I do as a fertility awareness educator, we're coming into contact with your cervical mucus. We're, sometimes if I have a client who's never even seen what their vulva looks like, I would potentially suggest for them to take a hand mirror and look at it. We're talking about examining the mucus on your toilet paper. For a lot of women, that's they're not doing it, and it makes them so uncomfortable. And it's just, the years of this is gross, my vagina is dirty, it smells funny. So so that's the other part I want you to talk about. How do you help women manage that aspect of this?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And it's at the heart of why I started doing the work that I do, because before, my primary focus was, how do you stop hating your period? The sense that there's something shameful or dirty inherently about periods and female genitalia and all this kind of stuff. So the way I approach it with my clients is, first of all, through the ebook that I created, Fertility Secrets of the Female Body, to start to have that, ask yourself, how do you feel about first menstruation? What was it like for you? What's your relationship with your period? Do you see it as a nuisance? Do you see it as a sense of failure? Because at the end of the day, that is the blood of life, right? That's where life begins. It begins in the womb. So to kind of gloss over or disregard what your relationship is with what makes you essentially a woman, I think is kind of foolish, because at the end of the day, that's where it starts. That's where life begins. So we need to reflect on what is our relationship here at the core of our being, the part of us that makes us female. And is there some healing that needs to be done? And so the way I do it, it's, very easy. It's not confrontational through meditation and, guided visualization. I have women listen to a meditation depending on where they are in their cycles, to connect with the go-getter, to connect with the nurturer, to connect with the enchantress, to connect with the wise woman, to find out what those gifts are there for them. What is the relationship? Why do you shift every week and a month? Your partner probably notices that you're not the same. We're cyclical. We're not psycho, but we are cyclical, and it's connected to our periods. So starting to reclaim that relationship, starting to understand and embrace the gifts that come with being a cyclical being. Then, of course, you talked about the intangible, and that's what yoga gives you, a connection to what you get when you're on the top of the mountain. You get when you just sit and close your eyes and breathe for 5 minutes. You're back at the same kind of level of deep, soulful merger, because that yoga, the definition is merger, is uniting. And so it's not necessarily about standing in tree pose. It's really about closing your eyes, breathing, and coming back to inside your own heart. So, of course, I take it a little bit deeper, and it's not just your heart, but it's also your womb. And, each visualization that I give my clients is around beginning to make that descent into connecting to your womb space, finding out what's there. It can be a place of profound love, profound connection, and sacredness. But I think you kind of need a guide sometimes, like you said, because it can feel so foreign. It can feel so, uncomfortable because we're not used to it. But like you said, a lot of us have an intuitive sense that there's something for us here to look at. There's something for us to deepen. A lot of people will say, I came to your website and I just felt this deep inner calling. I knew that there's something missing on my fertility journey. And it's this piece of magic, this piece of mystery that I don't quite know how to name. And so, I say, well, when I used to teach Moon Goddess Live, and it still happens with those who download the program, your glow will be mysterious and undeniable, because that's the magic of the feminine. And that's our birthright. Each of us has the right to merge with our inner glow and to radiate that power of the feminine out into the world. And it's supposed to work for us. It's not supposed to work against us, but we need to, if you want to take a part of your masculine self, well, this is a place where you need to make a decision that there's something missing. There's a disconnect for you, and you need to repair that disconnect. And this is one way to start to repair that disconnect. And it's not going to be, taking a pill or reading an article, but it's about going deep inside of yourself. And the healing will happen because that's what your body is meant to do. Your body is meant to heal itself, and you have all the answers inside of you, but you have to be willing to go inside to find the answers.
I'm just like, everything you say, I'm just like, yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that you said with regards to that intuitive sense, I've done several interviews on the concept of stress management, because I find that that's something that, especially when women are trying to conceive, it's presented in a way that's really condescending, I think, a lot of the time, which is just relax. Yeah. What does that even mean? So in several of my podcast episodes, there was that common theme of stress. And so I've talked about it from the very masculine, tangible sense, which is getting into the specific hormone levels, what's happening in your body, and how that impacts your menstrual cycle from a physiological standpoint, so that we have a really clear idea that this thing that we call stress is actually real, and it does have an actual impact on your ovaries and ovulation, all those types of things. But then getting into the other side of it, which is how to manage it. Most of us can't just go quit our jobs and, fly to Tahiti and lay there on the beach for 6 months, which we probably arguably need to do to relax and have that balance in our lives, but obviously it's not practical. So one of the things that you talked about kind of earlier on was having that time, say even 15 minutes a day, where you are in stillness and you're really connecting with your body. Because I love what you said when you said that conception happens in your body. It doesn't happen on the internet. Like, I need to put that on a t-shirt. Because it's so true. And just that alone makes us take that pause and really reflect on that and remember. But in my interview with Helen Adrian, which I'll link in the show, I really liked how she talked about it, because I kept asking her, so what about people who are like, I can't connect with this meditation stuff. Like, I can't connect with it. I just don't want to do this visualization stuff. And she's like, well, if you do it, she's like, what I see with my clients is that you end up feeling better.
Yeah.
So it doesn't become this in your head, like, well, I don't know about this stuff and it seems strange to me and I'm kind of uncomfortable with it, because she's like, what happens is my clients feel better. They come to me and they're at this kind of stress level 8, 9, 10, and then they take some time to really connect with their bodies, to do some breathing, meditation, guided visualization, fertility yoga, which I want to ask you about next. And then afterwards, they can feel that quite literal sense of the stress leaving their body and feeling a lot different, a lot more relaxed, and just feeling better in their bodies. And so, I mean, I want to bring it back to that, because I feel that kind of pressure on my audience's behalf to make it tangible enough so that for those kind of teetering on the fence of this, entering into this world, that it's really also about feeling better in your body. So I would love for you just to share your thoughts on that, and also to take us into fertility yoga and just a little bit more about how that has impacted your clients on their journey with their own fertility struggles.
Absolutely. And I'll get to that for sure. And I just want to, propose to those who are listening to just try it right now. You can close your eyes for a moment. Notice if you're clenching your teeth, and just separate the biting surfaces of your teeth. Let your jaw relax. If it feels comfortable, put one hand on your heart and one hand on your belly. Let your shoulders sink down away from your ears. And just take a breath. Then let it out. And take another breath. And let it go. And take one more breath. And maybe exhale with a sigh. And then just take a moment to notice how you feel. Just 3 breaths. And you will notice that your stress goes way down. You'll notice that you talk a little bit slower. You'll notice your heart rate has decreased. You'll notice that you have some clarity in your mind. You'll notice that you just feel more calm and your mind isn't racing. And that sense of anxious, tight holding in your body is let go a little bit. So the results are immediate. It's not a mental exercise. I don't really think you need to convince anyone. If anyone closes their eyes and takes 3 breaths, immediately you'll know that you feel calmer. So, imagine multiplying that to 3 minutes. It literally only takes 3 minutes from a Kundalini perspective for the 3 aspects of your mind to just connect. So the negative, the positive, and the neutral, for them to come into a place of connection within themselves takes 3 minutes. I think each of us has 3 minutes out of 24 hours to close our eyes and breathe. Because yoga is not about standing on your head or even putting your legs up the wall. It's really anyone that can breathe can do yoga. So the primary thing that fertility yoga will do for you is, of course, bring your stress way down so your body's not flooded with the stress hormones. Anxiety and worry will start to take a little bit of a backseat instead of being at the forefront of your awareness all the time. So it's not going to run you. They start to have a place within a bigger context of your mind can work better without all the stress running, and then you're only feeling anxiety and worry and trying to find solutions. That sense of drive starts to settle down. And, you probably already know that reproductive function literally gets shut off in the threat of danger because the body goes into self-preservation. So in order for the body to feel safe to allow reproduction, we really need to bring the stress hormone into a balanced place, because then the endocrine system, the part of your body that's regulating hormone balance, can actually start doing the job that it's meant to do. So Kundalini yoga, which is the yoga that I focus on in my fertility practice, targets the pituitary gland. So, and maybe some of your listeners know that the pituitary gland is the gland in your brain that regulates FSH, LH, estrogen, progesterone, and all kinds of other hormones, but those are the fertility hormones. And we need the fertility hormones to be in a balanced place. But if the body is being hijacked by stress, then there's going to be an impact on your fertility hormone levels as well. So Kundalini yoga is different in that it actually targets the endocrine system to bring it balanced. But even, I have a separate part to my practice. Part of it is also a hatha yoga practice. So that is specifically focused on blood flow and circulation to the ovaries and the uterus. So, here we have the tangible things like improving uterine lining, circulation to the uterus, blood flow to the uterus. You need to have good blood flow to uterus for uterine lining. You need good blood flow and circulation to the ovaries for good egg health and easier ovulation, especially if you're going through an IVF cycle and you're doing stims, like you're doing stimulation, then the ovaries can get overly activated and we want to find soothing. So there's a good yoga pose, the butterfly pose, that really helps with soothing the ovaries. We do legs up the wall, for example, when after you do a transfer to improve the blood flow to the uterus. So there's lots of different, and of course you can use these same poses in a natural cycle. You don't have to be in a treatment cycle. But there's specific yoga poses that you can do for specific outcomes. And then Kriyas, which is what we do in Kundalini yoga, is for a broader effect. So the meditation that I teach, it's a breath meditation that's specifically focused on balancing the menstrual cycle. So, you have the tangible physiological impacts that come from reduction of stress and just letting go of the anxiety and the worry. And that's a really huge benefit. And then there's the actual physical benefits when it comes to fertility on the uterus, on the ovaries, on implantation, and improving the chances of all of that happening in a cohesive, harmonious way. So I think that probably sums it up, unless you have more specific questions.
That was it's kind of like a marriage of, well, really, of how that intangible energy, but also then the practical application of yoga, so that we understand that it's helping us to connect on a deeper level. But then we compare that with the understanding of how it's helping our bodies in a very physical and obvious way. And who doesn't want to feel good? I know I do. I want to feel good in my body. And for any woman who's been struggling with fertility challenges, it doesn't feel good. You're stressed out all the time, right? So part of it is just doing something for you to make you feel good. And so I want to switch gears a little bit and go back into a bit more of the intangible. So in the week that we're recording this interview, this week on Friday, I'm releasing the interview. I did an interview with Molly Dutton-Kenny, and she's a full spectrum midwife. And we talked about pregnancy loss. And so we talked about abortion. We also talked about miscarriage and really delved into miscarriage in a super raw, honest way. Like I was in tears talking about it because, yeah. And I think it's important to bring up here because I wanted to shift a little bit and spend a few minutes talking about the role that having losses that you haven't allowed yourself to really consider and address. And I think that's for a lot of different reasons. We've talked a lot about the kind of masculine energy, and I'm bringing that back here because for some reason, miscarriage and pregnancy loss is just not acknowledged by our culture at all. And so you go through it and everyone feels uncomfortable, I guess. So they don't really, your friends and family don't always talk to you a whole lot about it. It kind of happens. You deal with it on your own. You go through the physical, experience and the emotional experience. And then no one really talks about it. And so I can just imagine how especially having more than one and having just that, it's just like it's sitting on your heart. It's just sitting there.
Yes. And that's why when I work with my clients who are recovering from miscarriage, I actually take them through a process that I created called Heart Healing Womb Blessing, because it's so painful. It cuts to the heart of, what it is to be a woman and that sense of like, my body failed me, or did I do something wrong? Or am I being punished because I had an abortion when I was, X age? Or, there's so much guilt. There's so much blame. There's so much sense of, I don't know, that somehow you're being punished. There's so many feelings that need to be looked at when it comes to miscarriage. So I really feel that healing, a deep conversation with your heart needs to be had. So I take my clients through something I created called the body prayer. And we check in with our heart to find out, what is the heart holding? What does the heart need to be acknowledged? Is there despair? Is there grief? Is there betrayal, pain, whatever it is? I say to my clients, you can't get over miscarriage. You have to go through it. Just like a breakup, you don't just try to rush over it after a divorce. It's a huge chasm, a huge loss that you've experienced. You need to move through the emotions. And there are stages of grief. We all know about them. We don't probably all know what they are in depth, but they're real. And miscarriage is part of, it needs to be grieved, and it isn't always grieved. So coming back to your question, a huge part of what I do and what I strongly believe is the heart and the womb. Even in Chinese medicine, they have a term for it called Bao Mai, which is essentially the uterine vessel, the connection between the heart and the womb. When there's, according to the theory in Chinese medicine, when there is deep grief held in the heart, it transmitted to the uterus. And so I don't say this to lay blame or to say that, it's somehow anyone's fault. I say this because when there is unresolved emotion in the heart, I really think we need to work with it instead of trying to push it away, instead of trying to disregard it or, quote unquote, get over it, because you can't get over the loss of a child. It doesn't matter if the child was, 5 weeks or a chemical pregnancy or, stillbirth. There's so much, it's a spectrum, and I don't think we can measure emotions on a spectrum of loss, because what is lost for one person may be different from another, but that doesn't mean their emotions are any more or any less important. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I really feel like we need to hold miscarriage. It's a trauma, and it requires that deep holding and deep healing that trauma and loss requires.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I've said this on the podcast a couple of times. So when a woman then goes through a miscarriage, it's typically only then that her friends who've also experienced it will kind of reach out. And so all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, I know 5 people who've had a miscarriage. I had no idea. And so, and then when you do give women a space to talk about it, they're always very, there's a lot of gratitude there, because I think there's that understanding that it's quite rare to actually have a safe space to honestly and openly talk about your experience with miscarriage in a way that you're not feeling judged. For instance, if it was so traumatic for you, but quote unquote, it was only 7 weeks along.
Yeah.
Right? To be able to actually grieve it fully and acknowledge the deep feelings that you had around it without any comparison to anyone else's experience.
Exactly. It's tricky. And I mean, 1 in 4 women, 1 in 4 pregnancies end in miscarriage. So from just a logical perspective, probably almost everyone you know had a miscarriage at some point along their way, if they've been trying to get pregnant. I know my mom had a miscarriage. I know my mom's friends had miscarriages. I know friends who've had miscarriages. But yes, there's this taboo. And it's a larger problem. We don't know how to deal with death in our culture. So we don't know how to deal with people's grief. When you say, how are you? You're not really expecting someone to tell you something truthful. You're just expecting them to say fine or good. You're not really interested in how someone really is feeling, because you don't have the tools to respond. You don't actually know how to hold space for someone's real deep emotions and grief. So nobody tells you about them. And this comes right back to the menstrual cycle. In my opinion, when you don't know how to go into the depths, into the darkness, you have an opportunity every single month to do it. In your premenstrual and menstrual phase, you are being taken down into the depths of your being. You can learn how to go there and start to feel comfortable with darkness, because when you're comfortable with your own darkness, you can be comfortable with others' darkness. But if you're only interested in being bright and sunshine and in the light, then you don't have the tools to deal with someone else's darkness and grief. So it's each of our individual responsibility, I believe, to start to own our own dark places. There's nothing shameful about negative emotion. You can't have day without night. You can't have light without dark. Yin does not exist without yang. So each of us has a responsibility to ourselves to know how to be with our own sadness, with our own pain. And in that journey, you will learn how to be more compassionate. You'll learn how to be more empathetic. Women will be more capable of sharing pain and sadness. Facebook is only about, most times, about what's happening that's brilliant in your life. It's not true. It's a curated version of your life. You're not sharing. I mean, how much of your life is actually all bright star, sunshine, and how much of your life isn't, but you're not posting that stuff. So we have this culture of pushing away and disregarding what doesn't feel good in preference for glamorizing and making even bigger what might be small things, like you're having a nice meal at a restaurant. So we need balance. And in order for miscarriage and pregnancy loss and abortion and anything that we consider or infertility, of course, anything that we consider shameful or too painful to talk about, has a deeper root of discomfort in general with our own inner pain and darkness. And so that's why I think healing is at the center of everything. And, starting to heal your own relationship with your female body, starting to embrace your relationship with your cycles and your womb. And then when you have that relationship, then you can go out into the world and be different. But it starts with you.
Mm-hmm. Well, and before I ask my final wrap-up questions, I just wanted to we talked about miscarriage then and grieving the loss of that. But what I find powerful in the work that you do is that you also address infertility in the same way, in a sense.
Yeah.
And so it may, for many women who've experienced challenges with fertility, they may not think of it kind of as obviously a loss as a miscarriage. I mean, we can all agree that that is clearly a loss that needs to be grieved. Whereas infertility and all of the challenges that happen, failed IVF attempts, and all of the things that happen around fertility treatments and trying to conceive. And every month, you had touched on it initially as well, which was a lot of women then every month is that reminder when their period comes that they're not pregnant. And so before I ask my wrap-up questions, I would just love for you to touch on that aspect of it and why it's important to look at those experiences as something that you may need to actually heal and grieve.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's huge because there's an expectation generally when we're younger that we're just going to get pregnant, that we need to actually shield ourselves because pregnancy is like lurking and it's going to be easy and it's something that we actually need. So we're only taught how to avoid it. And of course, your work is, I think, central to that. Like, actually, there's a rhythm to how you get pregnant and all these different things have to be in place. So first of all, it's like realizing that this false understanding of our bodies and this false understanding of fertility and pregnancy. So in a way, it's almost grieving this notion that it was just supposed to happen. It was supposed to happen easily. And it's supposed to happen to all women. Nobody considers that they're going to have trouble getting pregnant. Like almost nobody considers that as when you're in your teens and your early 20s. And then there's this sense of failure that's so, I hear it so often from women that whether it's I failed as a woman or my body has failed me or why can't my body do what it's supposed to do, that's a really painful place to stand. And again, I really believe that you can't gloss over it. You can't just do positive affirmations. There's some grief there. You need to process that grief. You might have had a vision of your life a particular way, and that vision didn't come to be, and you're 40. That's something real emotions that I really feel we need to be able to grieve and to heal. Like you can't heal unless you grieve it, I don't believe. So there's two camps, those who, often people who are struggling with infertility say, well, my sister-in-law got pregnant and my neighbor, and then how come that girl who's on drugs? And there's a sense that there's something must be wrong with me. And I think that is a really painful place to be. So you need support in that place. And what I say to clients or women who I meet along my journey is that there's something, infertility has come into your life for a reason. And ideally, you want to get the support to discover that reason for yourself so that you can really get to the other side. And maybe the other side includes your own biological genetic child. Maybe the other side includes egg donation or sperm donation. Maybe that other side includes adoption. But you will get to the other side. There's no doubt that you will. It's just how long it's going to take you to get there. And when you get support, it does accelerate that process. The first thing my clients say to me is, first I got myself back, then I got my baby. And that's really important, that whatever healing work you do, whatever support you do, it helps you move through the emotional aspects of infertility or pregnancy loss or any kind of reproductive disorder that you're dealing with. That's your journey. And hopefully at some point in your life, you realize, oh, I needed to go through this because of blah, blah, blah. In order to find meaning, everybody needs to find meaning from their own challenges and tragedies in life. Otherwise, you don't feel at peace. So that's what that's basically what I want to say on that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I have a few wrap-up questions for you. So given our discussion today, what is one thing that you would really like our listeners to take away from our conversation?
That you do have control. And if you can take the time even if it's 3 breaths, even if it's 3 minutes, to close your eyes and connect with yourself. If nothing else, you'll find some peace, you'll find some relief. And if you do decide to go further, you might actually discover gifts that you never imagined.
And if there was one fertility myth that you would like to see corrected, what would that be?
That if you search long enough and see enough experts, that you're going to find the solution and fix yourself. We didn't really talk about unexplained infertility. So just to touch on it quickly, when you have nothing, quote unquote, physiologically wrong with you, I strongly believe that really the answer is inside of you. You are being guided inside of yourself to the answer. So to think that if you see one more specialist or try one more miracle treatment, which I actually have a lot of faith in technology, and what's happening in the world is quite miraculous, the things that they can do. But there needs to be a marriage of, you can't depend, you can see the best doctors, you can take the best drugs, you can be on the best protocol. But if you don't believe that your body can do it, if you don't have a real sense of confidence, trust, and faith and belief inside of yourself, no amount of technology is going to fix you. It needs to be a marriage of your body and whatever help that you're getting.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And, I don't think anyone else has ever shared that. No, thank you so much for sharing that. And it's an amazing note to end on. And Zahra, oh my goodness, what a powerful interview this was. I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and wisdom with our audience. I know that this interview is going to be just so powerful for so many of my listeners, my clients. I have that sense already.
Oh, Lisa, thank you so much. I feel so deeply honored, and I just love the fact that we're essentially neighbors, and one day I get to give you a hug in person.
I know. It's so awesome because it's this interesting online world where I connect with people from all over the world. So it's so nice to be able to be local and actually be able to see you at some point. So how can our listeners get in touch with you and find out more about your programs and more about what you do?
Sure. So the easiest way is through my website, yogagoddess.ca. You can check out there's an ebook that you can download called Fertility Secrets of the Female Body, and it will encapsulate pretty much everything that we talked about during our interview with you, Lisa. It will also deepen some of the concepts. And Moon Goddess is my signature program. It's yoga and meditation and moon cycle charting specifically for fertility, or for those who are not trying to get pregnant. There's a version for hormone health. And then I do see people in person for womb blessings in Toronto, and I also do them virtually. So if you're elsewhere, we can do distance womb blessings over the phone. And I do some mentoring for menstrual cycle and moon cycle connection and how to work with your goddess energies. And basically all of that you can find on yogagoddess.ca.
Okay, well, thank you again for being here, Zahra. It was a real pleasure to be able to just chat with you. I really enjoyed our conversation, so I'm really excited to share it with the audience.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend. You'll find the show notes page for today's episode at fertilityfriday.com/120. I enjoyed my interview with Zahra today. Zahra is a wealth of knowledge, and I love that we delved into some of the more intangible aspects of this fertility journey. And what I really loved about this interview was the discussion that we had around feminine and masculine energy and how they're both important, but it's important also to have a balance between the two. And how a lot of us, just by the nature of the jobs that we have, the lives that we lead, and in the kind of dominant culture that we live in, we're often having an imbalance in favor of masculine energy, that striving, doing, achieving, fixing, figuring out, and that kind of intellectual understanding, scientific understanding of how everything works. When we all know intuitively that that's not the only part of the story, and it's equally important, it's an extremely important part of the story, but we all know that there's this other element that we can't quite put our fingers on. And what I think about when I want to bring it back is that although we can go through and explain the science of conception, do we really know why one follicle is chosen to, reach maturity and then ovulate versus another? Do we really know why, when there's millions of sperm that are released in ejaculation, why one sperm is chosen versus another for that genetic material to unite with the egg? So for all of the amazing scientific knowledge that we do have, and for all of the amazing technological advancements that we have, which are, if we take a moment and think about what we're capable of, in this day and age, it's really incredible. And it's important to acknowledge that. And I think to really value that. I mean, there's so many things that are possible now that our grandmothers couldn't have even imagined. But with that being said, we still have to keep in mind that there's still a balance. Because for all of the things that we do know as a culture through science and all of the different things that come along just by being in this amazing time that we're living in, there's still so much that we don't know. And there's still that mystery, that wonder. And for example, as a fertility awareness educator who observes women's charts, why is it that a woman will time sex exactly in her fertile window some months when she has clear mucus observations? The sex happened exactly the right time according to our understanding and knowledge. And, she had lots of mucus observations, confirmed ovulation. Why is it that she didn't get pregnant 1 month versus another? So our knowledge takes us to a really important place, but it's important to remember to balance that with that feminine energy and to understand that the practical understanding and knowledge takes us a lot further than if we didn't have it, but it doesn't complete the whole story. It doesn't tell us the whole story. So with that being said, if you enjoyed the podcast, please look for it on iTunes and leave a 5-star review. So if you've been enjoying the podcast for a while, I really appreciate all of the reviews that have been left. There's so many amazing positive reviews that I see there. So thank you so much. And make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com and sign up for my email list. And you'll receive a free copy of my ebook where I reveal what to expect when you're coming off of hormonal contraceptives. And I share 5 steps to restoring healthy menstrual cycles post-pill. And also, if you've listened to the podcast for a while, you can actually find us on Facebook. I have a private Facebook group for the Fertility Friday community, which you'll find by going to fertilityfriday.com/community, and you'll be redirected to the group. And so I just want to thank you for hanging out with me today. I really appreciate all of you for taking the time to tune into the podcast, letting me be part of your day, letting me be part of your commute to work to make your commute to work just a little bit more fun than it was before you started listening to the podcast. So thank you again. And as always, be well and happy charting.